I want to talk about buying in areas where the equity and appreciation are most prevalent. I think that's super important when you look at buying a short-term rental. There's an appeal sometimes to buy in areas that maybe are like close to your home or convenient to you, or in certain areas that maybe you visited as a kid.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Moore, and we're back with a Whiskey Wednesday segment with my main man, Mr. Dave Sabulich.
Hey, buddy.
How's it going, buddy?
Good.
Ready to go?
Yep.
All right, guys. These are our short, sweet, to the point episodes where we're going to cover a couple things going on in our world, what's going on in the short-term rental world that we find on the internet, or things that are interesting to talk about. And then we answer questions. That's a big part of the show, is answering your guys' questions that you send in. So whatever platform you're watching or listening on, make sure that you put it in the comments. If you have a question, we'll make sure that we answer it on an upcoming episode. So today, what are we talking about?
Well, it's hot here in Utah.
It is hot.
It's record heat.
Yep.
It's supposed to be,
We got the heat dome over the whole West.
Yeah, this is crazy. So
Vegas just hit 120, dude.
Yeah.
120, all-time high in Vegas. All-time high in Phoenix, 118.
yeah. So I was talking to a member, Odyssey member yesterday up in Oregon, and he enlightened me on a very unique law that Oregon has. It's has to deal with the temperatures, and I'm just going to read it because I got this fancy.
So this is something you verified.
Yeah,
You
I
verified this is not fake news.
Looked online.
This is
got
not.
Got it online. Heard it from the member one, but then I factually checked it. Looked online, and there's an Oregon law that's come into play, and it's when the heat index is 95 degrees. Employers must provide a 20-minute cool down rest break for every hour of work. If it jumps to 100 degrees or greater, a 30-minute break every hour. And if it goes to 105 or greater, a 40-minute work break every hour. So think of that. So right now in Utah, 105, every hour, we chilling for 40 minutes. You know what I mean?
And I'm paying.
And you're paying.
I'm paying. If I'm the business owner, I'm paying.
Yep, 95. I mean, 90. Wow. It's 95 a lot in Utah. I mean, this is indoors or outdoor jobs. Now, an indoor job, most likely it's not going to get. But if you were in an attic, in a roof, or in a factory that didn't have good ventilation or whatever, you're required to provide shade for your employees and water as well. I just think that's insane. I mean, I get it. Like, I'm for taking care of people for sure, but you're shutting down the whole Vegas is shut down.
That's your disclaimer.
For the
you
whole
don't run
month.
Sweatshops. You're not into sweatshops.
No, I'm not. I don't do.
Hey,
but, by the way,
I'll tell you, I'm telling you, the whole West Coast is soft, dude. They're getting soft. The stupidest shit you hear about comes from Oregon, Washington, California. All you normal people up in Oregon, California, Washington, there's a lot of you because I talk to you and I know you.
Yeah.
You got to do something about this stuff. This is like the unintended consequence of stupid policymakers that you put in. You've got to do something. You've got to get some of these guys out of office. So if I own a land care company.
Yep, you're mowing lawns, right?
And we're mowing lawns.
It's 95.
And it hits 95. Now I've got to pay for a half an hour and then a half an hour sit time.
Two strips back and forth. Take a break. Couple more.
You don't want to do it. Don't do it.
Yeah.
You work for, like, I used to own a roofing company. I used to roof, like, I was on the roofs for all summer long for 5 years. That's all I did. And I mean, that's hard work and it's hot as hell.
Yeah.
And not one time, like, we were like, hey, make sure that you put some sunscreen on and make sure you're drinking water. And that was it. That was our, that was, and it was up to you to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and that you're staying healthy if you get a job like that. So to have states come down and have these laws, I'm telling you, dude,
it's crazy.
It's so dumb. It is. I can't even hardly listen to it anymore. It hurts. Here's who it hurts. It hurts that small business owner.
Yeah,
it hurts
absolutely.
It hurts the landscape company. It hurts the roofing company because they can't afford to pay for half an hour of work and pay a whole hour, right? And so it's the same bullshit that happened in COVID. And the big companies are essential, but guess what? The local hardware store has to shut down. The local restaurant has to shut down. I'm telling you, I feel like that these things are like an attack on small businesses, and I can't stand it. I know this is not real estate related, short-term rental related, but I think it's worth talking about. And I won't go off on a huge tangent with you, but I think it's stupid.
Well, and it is a little related because Vodacy right here, I can tell you one thing about Vodacy. We're never stopping. We're never going out of business because it's like 52 degrees here in this office. Shawn keeps the temperatures and the air conditioning so low. There's no chance we're even going to come close to that.
It's because I heard about that law, and so I make sure that I'm not paying for work that's not going to get done. Right? Nope. I turn the AC like. You walk in your office, you would have to probably give somebody a break in your office. Yeah. You got your heater on, you got your blankets out.
I got electric heater in my office during the winter, summer, the whole year round because it's so cold in this office. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you would fall under the sweatshop in your office.
My son just texted me about a half hour ago and says, "Do you want me to bag or can I mulch the lawn?" It's 100. I said, "You bag that sucker." So he's out right now. He's working. Take a break. Get a drink if you need.
Hey, just so you know, he could. If he was in Oregon, he could file a complaint that you've got him out there cutting the lawn right now. Me.
Yep. He better get all his weeds out too.
It's so stupid. You verified this is a state law.
Oh yeah, it is. It's state law. It was enacted in 2022. The only thing I didn't verify, but I just assume, just as a disclaimer, is I'm assuming you have to pay for the hour. I couldn't find that. I couldn't find it, but there's all kinds of stipulations about what you have to do. You have to provide shade. You have to provide water if you're working outside. And I'm assuming if you're working, you can't.
So any construction
you can't just pay them for 20
minutes. And here's the problem with it. Guess who gets affected? Now they're all bitching about housing prices, but every construction job, they're working outside in the heat in the summertime. Yeah. And so when it gets over 95 degrees,
they can't even get
and that contractor has to pay his laborers double because you're only paying for half the time, or if it gets really hot, which I don't think it gets above 105 in Oregon very often.
No,
but probably hits 95, 100 probably through the summer months,
and depending on what part of Oregon.
If you're in
Western Oregon or Eastern Oregon,
you get. So here's the problem though. In the unintended consequence, like I said, of all these policymakers that do this stupid stuff, and they're like, "Hey, listen, we mean well." They probably do. It's like we want to make sure that the laborers and the workers are healthy and taken care of. Like I get it. That's the argument, right? The problem with it is now all of a sudden that house that you already are bitching about that's too expensive, that was getting built by all these people that are these contractors are having to pay laborers for time that they're not working. Guess who the cost gets pushed down to?
Yeah.
The consumer.
All right.
So now all of a sudden your housing cost is higher. Everything gets pushed down because it's going to ultimately affect that consumer. So as a consumer, don't have these policymakers in place.
All right.
Your vote matters. Like it's an election year. Talk about it. Go in and vote for the things that matter, because when you talk about housing prices and the economy and everything else and how small businesses are struggling right now, it's because of all this bullshit that's put in place, and it comes down to this stupid ass law of 95 degrees or higher, and you have to start paying for time that they're not working.
Yeah.
Right?
I know. It's that whole tangent came off because it's hot here in Utah.
Yeah, good job on that one, dude. That was our off the topic
but it is
today.
Important. I'm glad that I wanted to get you fired up as we start into the short-term rental side of things.
Okay,
so you ready for that?
I'm ready.
Okay,
let's go.
All right, let's talk. I want to talk about buying in areas where the equity and appreciation are most prevalent. I think that's super important when you look at buying a short-term rental. There's an appeal sometimes to buy in areas that maybe are like close to your home or convenient to you, or in certain areas that maybe you visited as a kid. I think those are all great ideas, and a lot of that comes from being a lifestyle asset, places you can vacation. But I also think sometimes we miss on diving into properties that we know that down the road are going to appreciate and going to provide us some equity. There's nothing worse than buying a property that in 2, 3, 4 years from now it really didn't appreciate, and you look at other places and they're appreciating like crazy.
Right.
And one of the things you always say is buy in really good areas, buy in areas that are very favorable to short-term rentals, and I think that's a big part of why we do that.
Yeah, I always say buy quality assets in quality areas. Mm-hmm. And the number one reason is because the appreciation potential,
Yeah.
right? Because appreciation is not the same across the board, period. I mean, it's not. It's very regional. It's very micro-regional. And what I mean by that is every area has a good side of the tracks and a bad side of the tracks.
Right.
And the bad side of the tracks doesn't appreciate as much as the good side of the tracks, right? And so one thing I love about short-term rentals, and it's why I was attracted to them in the very, very beginning, is they allowed me to cash flow quality assets in quality areas. A lot of these areas that we buy in would never cash flow as a long-term rental. If they would, we probably would turn them into a long-term rental because it allows us to pay down and buy and own quality assets in quality areas. When you're on your wealth building journey, right, and you're getting into real estate and you're trying to figure out whether it's real estate or whether it's stocks or whether it's all these different things, right? Real estate has some really unique benefits when it comes to taxes and depreciation, and it has and some really unique benefits when it comes to leverage, right? I can't walk into Wells Fargo and say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Banker, I am looking to buy $500,000 of Apple stock, and I've got $200,000 I'd like to put down, or $100,000 I'd like to put down. Can you lend me the rest to go buy that stock? They're not going to do it, right? So we have some really unique ways to leverage with banks to be able to get into these assets. They're tangible. That's what the banks like. That's what we should like as investors. What I like as an investor, why I like real estate. Not that those other things don't go up in value, but when, let's say your stock is performing at a 10% annual increase, like, well, let's say you go into the S&P 500 for the last 40 years, like an 8%, right? It's 8% across the board. Right. Pretty good return, right? Average across the board on real estate is 5%. So on the surface, people will be like, maybe real estate's not quite as good. When you look at that and you say, okay, that 5% that it's going up is, if I only put 20% down, so on that $500,000 property, I put $100,000 down and it went up 5%, that property gained $50,000 in value by going up 5%, or I mean $25,000 in value, excuse me, on $500,000, went up $25,000. So I gained 25% on my $100,000 in because the entire asset went up 5%, but I leveraged 80% of it. I put 20% down. So I got a 25% return. So you start to compound your returns with real estate. And what people don't realize, and I think that is a huge mistake, and a mistake that I recently made. I preach this all the time and say, quality assets, quality areas. You have to evaluate three things. The appreciation potential, how quality is the asset in the area, and what does the appreciation potential look like? The tax advantages of it, because that's a real return that you're going to get if you're a taxpayer and you're a high income earner. And then the final thing is the cash flow. But the final thing that I look at is cash flow. A lot of people start with cash flow and they chase the cash flow and they forget about this. And I bought a property recently. I'm going to do a case study, so I'm not going to get into all the details on it because I'm going to do a case study so people can see the mistake I made, and went against that rule, chased the cash flow because this property was $250, paid cash for it. At the time I bought it, was grossing almost $80,000. So you run the numbers after all expenses. I don't have debt service on it. I was making a really good return on my investment. Cash on cash return was really good, right? Problem is, I paid $250 for it 3 years ago. Today I'm under contract for $210 because it wasn't in a quality area. It was a quality area in Destin, Florida, but a Class C condo complex that didn't have pride of ownership. It continued to go down and down and down, and it looks worse today than it did when I bought it. And now all of a sudden, nobody wants to buy in there. And so not only did my revenue suffer along the way, but also that asset was not a quality asset in a quality area, right? And so I violated that rule, and all of a sudden, I'm not getting the return I want. And when it comes to appreciation, it is... And everybody's like, well, that's speculative. And it is. There's no guarantee on appreciation. But we know over time that, and you look at the longer the time horizon, the better it looks, is real estate is going to go up in value. It's a tangible asset and it goes up in value, right? Honestly, I just did a thing that if I compared real estate, Bitcoin, the S&P 500, gold, silver, and compared all the charts for the last 20 years. All of them went up in value. over a long time horizon, all of those assets go up in value. So when you say, hey, listen, I'm going to invest for the long term because they all go up, right? Real estate, you have the benefits of leverage. And so you compound that return. And somebody will say, well, that's a paper return. Well, most stocks that you invest in, and they're not dividend paying stocks. Most of the stocks, if you buy a stock at $10 and it goes up to $15, it's a paper return until you sell it. Same with real estate. So it's still a return, right? You're not going to sit there and say that, well, I don't know what the return is until I sell it. That's your actual return is when you do sell it, but you still have a return there, right? And so areas when it comes to real estate are very, very regional. They're very, very specific. And I think that a lot of times people will chase the cash flow first when in my buying criteria, that's the third thing that I'm looking at. I don't like buying negative cash flow properties. But if I can buy a really quality asset in a quality area that somebody else is paying for and I'm breaking even, it's a great investment. It's a great investment long term. You and I just barely sold a property that we almost 3x'd our money in, right? We paid $275 for it. Put 10% down, cash flowed while we owned it for 18 months, sold it, and made $100,000 on it. I mean, that's like a 3x return on our money, 300% return on that money. That's awesome. And it wasn't because we made 300% return on the cash flow of it. It wasn't cash flowing that much. It was like $800 a month, but the return was real to us. But it was because of appreciation. I think that a lot of people, because they don't realize that in their pocket every month, they don't think that's real. But your real wealth is made when your assets appreciate over time.
Well, and I'm looking forward to the case study too, because I think the transparency that Odyssey has and that you've had is, there are mistakes that are made. And we want to learn from those mistakes. We want people to understand the mistakes, and we want people not to make those same mistakes. It's just like a parent. We've been through a lot of things that we teach our kids on. Listen, I've been there. Don't do that. It's the same thing. Like, don't be afraid to show case studies that, when things aren't always perfect, So I mean, I love that.
If you make a mistake, but recognize what mistake you made. And it's the thing that we're talking about right now is quality assets, quality areas go up in value, period. They do. And they will, the longer the time horizon, the better you're going to be.
Okay, let's jump into a question. We got a really good question from one of our members, Jackie. She emailed it in yesterday to us. I'm just going to read it straight forward here on my little iPad.
All right.
Technology here. I was wondering if you guys could talk real quick about the IRR on a short-term rental. When the cash-on-cash return shows negative for a few years, but the IRR return is significantly positive. Should I entertain the property if it underwrites like this? So, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And so IRR, for those of you listening, is called the internal rate of return, right? And that's calculating a number of different things. And everybody, just so you know, a lot of people will calculate IRR differently, right? But what it does is it takes all of the things that you have a gain on. It takes your cash flow, it takes your appreciation, it takes your note pay down, it takes the tax savings, the write-offs that you have, all those different things that are going on that actually affect the return on your property. And so what Jackie's saying, she's saying, hey, I was looking at a pro forma on a property that has negative cash flow, but it's got a positive IRR because most likely you're underwriting a property that you put some appreciation in there and some note pay down, right? And so your appreciation might have been 5% in that instance. Let's say it was a that $25,000 gain on a $500,000 property, and you had a negative cash flow of $5,000 for the year, but you had a positive gain on the property of $25,000, you're net ahead $20,000 still, right? And so on your $100,000, you had negative cash flow. It affects the IRR, but if we combine just those two on your IRR, your cash flow -5, your appreciation of 25, your actual return, your internal rate of return on that investment year one would be 20%, right? Because you have $100,000 in, -5,000 cash flow, positive 25,000 appreciation. Now your IRR is 20%. Now, if I start to add and layer on my note pay down, right? Let's say my note got paid down by an extra $5,000 that year on my payments on that property. Somebody paid my note down by $5,000. Probably not that high on year one, depending on how your amortization schedule is, but I can at least do the math in my head, right? And so now all of a sudden that's another positive $5,000 that you gained by somebody else paying off your property, right? And so now that IRR went from -5 to 20 to now positive 25. Now, what if I had a bonus depreciation and I wrote off that property and I ended up having a tax write-off of, let's say I had a tax write-off of $100,000 and I end up, that saved me $35,000 in taxes because I got that write-off after I depreciated that property. And I saved $35,000 real money that I didn't have to pay the IRS that I would have had to pay Uncle Sam, right? And so now I add that $35,000 onto the $25,000, and I look at that and I say, well, I only have $100,000 in. Year one, I have 25% plus another 35, so I've got a 50% or a 60% return, a 60% IRR.
Right.
And so that's where IRR starts to look really good, and it's a real number. It's what you really should consider. What you can do as an investor, what you should do. I don't typically look at my note pay down just because it's not as easy to pull up and figure out exactly, right? Depending on where you're at on your amortization schedule, how many payments in, all that stuff. You can figure that out if you wanted to take the time, take 15 minutes and do it. But it's real easy for me to figure out my cash flow because I'm tracking that all the time. It's real easy for me to figure out appreciation because we're anticipating that, and you go find that, right? Your realtors, if you want to know exactly what the average appreciation is for your micro area within your market, go ask a realtor and they'll be able to find that because on the MLS, it tracks that stuff pretty close. And so, but you can find rough estimates like on Redfin and stuff on what the average appreciation is in your zip code. And so you can say, okay, you can plug that in and say, okay, what did I gain this year on that property? And my write-offs and my depreciation and my tax savings, pretty easy to tell as well. And so the internal rate of return is a number that an investor should absolutely pay attention to because just like we were saying, you can have a positive IRR with a negative cash-on-cash return.
Yeah. Good.
I hope that makes sense.
No,
Does
that totally makes sense.
For Jackie?
I think she'll appreciate it. I appreciate it because it's always good to get a refresher on kind of what that looks like. Because sometimes you look at, just the cash flow or you look at just the lifestyle asset when you buy an asset and you're like, wow, this is pretty good. There's a lot more benefits, to it than I really realized.
And this goes back to the conversation we were just having about appreciation.
Yeah.
It's why you
buy quality assets.
You buy quality assets in quality areas because you're going to look back 5 years from now and you stacked a couple, a handful of quality assets in quality areas and you're like, holy crap, look at the gain I made.
Yeah. Most
of the time people are in such a rush to replace their income or quit their job or do that stuff and they're chasing the wrong thing. It would be like me chasing that cash on cash return on that Destin property that I just told you about, end up not being a great deal for me.
Yeah.
Right. And I have much better deals that we've had. I didn't end up really negative on that because it was cash flowing the whole time, more than the $40,000 that I lost on the appreciation. But it's an insignificant investment for me because I violated that one rule.
Yeah. Good. All right, buddy, that's it for today. Let's wrap it up. Yep.
Okay, guys, you guys know the drill. As always, I like to thank you for spending your time with us. It is, we know how valuable it is, and we appreciate you that you're spending it with us, listening to us, trying to get, stay up to speed on the short-term rental game. Our goal is to help you walk into this with your eyes wide open. So always send in those questions. Those things help us with topics that you guys want to hear and you guys want to talk about. And that's exactly why we ask you to do that. So whatever platform you're watching or listening on, make sure you do that so that we can talk about the things that you want to talk about. We can answer the questions that you're most interested in. If you feel like somebody else is interested in this stuff, please share the show. We don't run sponsorships, ads, anything else on that show. So the only way that the word spreads is for you guys to share it. So if you have more than 30 seconds, like it, leave us a review on whatever platform you're watching or listening on. And when you've got a friend that you think is interested in these same conversations, share that show, and it helps us grow it and keep this conversation alive. And then the final, most important thing that I ask you at the end of every episode is go pick that one thing you can do today to start building that life you don't want to take a vacation from. Cheers, my friends. Cheers, brother.
Cheers, buddy.